ladies and gentlemen. This is Public Works Committee. We have one general agenda item and we have 3 consent agenda items. Are there any of the consent agenda items to be pulled for discussion? C2, A, and B? All right. Is there a motion on C1 and C3?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, no? All right, they're adopted. C2, please.
Item C2, consideration of street closing petitions. A, petition to close and abandon a portion of North Chestnut Street located south off of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. In the East Ward, petition of Goler Community Development Corporation, public hearing scheduled for October 26, 2015. And B, petition to close and abandon a portion of North Liberty Street located east off of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. In the East Ward, petition of William L. Spencer, public hearing scheduled for October 26, 2015.
Thank you. Mr. Montgomery, do you want a full presentation or you have questions?
I don't actually, just comments on these, both of these.
Okay.
On the petition by Goler, this is in advance of the development that will be taking place there. And so this is essentially them getting the footprint necessary to get ready to do the construction work that will be the apartments coming up on that side of Martin Luther King. And on the other side of the street, as we know, last month we rezoned property located on that side of the street, entertainment district. And again, this is a part of auxiliary function of business that will be developing on that side. So both of these are associated with some type of expansion or development of businesses, and just wanted to put that into the record.
Okay.
And so with that, I move approval.
All right, of C2A and C2B?
Correct.
All right, and that's been properly seconded. Is there further discussion? If not, this will set the public hearing for these 2 items on October 26th. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? That's unanimously approved. Thank you. We will go now to item G1.
Business 40, US 421, streetscape design betterments information.
Thank you. And so we have some problems on that. And who will be presenting this evening?
Mr. Chairman, Connie with the Winston-Salem Department of Transportation, Deputy Director, will be presenting that.
All right, thank you. Please present.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So Business 40 project is a labor of love indeed, and it's a project that we remain excited about. And as we get closer to the request for proposals, our timeline is getting tight, and we wanted to bring this item to you so that you have a feel for what the general costs for betterments from NCDOT are looking like, and to let you know that next month, after continued work with NCDOT, we will be bringing a recommendation to you for consideration in the funding. Let's see, in looking at the project funding, the $3 million city bond referendum is one level of funding. Another option in funding is the congestion management and air quality funds, or congestion mitigation and air quality funds. And the Transportation Advisory Committee in July approved $1.49 million. There is another item this Thursday for consideration for the same amount. And if that is approved, then there will be $2.98 million for congestion funds available in this. This will require a local match of about $750,000. We are currently showing that amount of funding coming out of the bond projects for the local match. With that, the total balance then available for CMAQ related improvements would be $3.7 million, leaving $2.25 million for other enhancements. And for these funds, I do want to point out that the only thing congestion management funds can be used for in this particular project is the multi-use path, because that's the approved use. The other city bond funds are available for any improvements. So the multi-use path includes betterments for wider sidewalks along Peters Creek Parkway, High Street, and Brookstown Avenue. That will accommodate the multi-use path and extra sidewalk width on the Peters Creek Parkway Bridge because the MUP does come up and cross over. There are additional roadway elements that are also required if the MUP is constructed: guardrail, expressway gutter, retaining wall, implements, lengthening bridges, a culvert under Peters Creek Parkway, and a connection to both Westdale and Peters Creek Parkway at the ballpark. So on either end of the tunnel, because the FHWA wants the connection to make sense, they want connectivity to the local streets from the tunnel.
You're still talking about the congestion, whatever.
Yes,
funds.
yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
Sorry.
Yes,
Okay.
right. So in looking at other betterments, there are certain things that cannot be completed later that really need to be completed with the project, and I've highlighted those as well. The Business 40 street lighting is an element that must be done with the project. Enhanced bridge facades are something that cannot be done later. Enhanced retaining walls, such as the embedded brick or form line and stained, you cannot come back and do those later. Multi-use path preparations for phase 1, if those are not completed, they will preclude further development of the multi-use path. The bridge rail, there's a choice to be made on that as well, whether enhanced rails are desired or if one of the more decorative NCDOT rails are chosen that are colored, painted. Pedestrian bridges must go in, so they will be enhanced to some level. And we also would want to make sure for safety and security on those bridges that they have pedestrian level lighting. Another option for the pedestrian bridges is architectural lighting, and that has to be designed in with the bridges for conduit. It's very difficult to go back after the fact because there's structural elements that are impacted. There are also conduit on the bridges for future lighting of monuments. So if the art that is proposed for the four quarters on each of the bridges, if the conduit does not go from one corner of the bridge across to the other, then it will be difficult to light. It would require separate meters, and so that would be something that would need to be done at this time. There's also aerial utilities in the Cherry Street and Marshall Street corridors, and we looked at the renderings that we've seen in the past do not show any of the aerial utilities in the drawings. However, they are part of that view shed, and we have estimates for a full utility relocation and also for a duct bank that would allow for future relocation. So if utilities are desired to be relocated, the minimum improvement that would need to be made would be the installation of the duct bank. The items that can be deferred and completed later would be pedestrian level lighting along our streets. Because we have street lighting in the area, that would be sufficient for pedestrian safety. The pedestrian level lighting really would be more of an aesthetic benefit. Also, enhanced landscaping along the corridor can be completed in stages. Staining of concrete retaining walls. There are different components in the retaining walls. For the brick embedded option, as an example, part of that is $1.6 million for the brick embedding. There's $1.6 million for stamping and a little over $500,000 for the staining. So if we were to defer stamping and staining, that would be a $2.2 million savings. We could not go back and stamp the retaining walls in the future, but they could be stained in the future.
What do you mean by stamping?
Let me show you a photograph.
Make it look like wood.
Yes, to make it look like brick. So if you, well, actually in this case, it would be limestone. If we do the brick embedding, which this picture may show a little bit of that. Here you see, and the cursor disappears, the brick. Below the brick, there is, and it may be easier to see on this one. You see here, it has a limestone feel at the bottom 6 feet. And then the brick embedding would be above. There are concrete bands that run vertically with a concrete cap on each side. So if we were to defer stamping this, that would save $1.6 million. And, you know, the concrete could be stained later when, you know, funding was found for that.
What are you stamping with?
It's a plastic form liner that gets embedded in the form when they pour the concrete.
It's
That is
stamped
the,
to look like brick. It's stamped with a plastic sheeting that makes it look like brick when you pull the stamp away.
That's what I was thinking. How, what's the difference in the appearance? So you're saying that if you did the brick where it's
Yes.
shown there,
yes,
but you didn't do the stamp form on the lower section, that would save 1.6 million.
that's correct.
And you're not talking about any stamp.
For retaining walls. But the brick option is real brick.
That's real brick.
That is real brick.
Not stamping, it's just.
It is not just stamping. Okay. This is embedding. It's a process called embedding. And our consultant did a lot of research and proposed this option to NCDOT, and their structures folks reviewed the option and found that this is acceptable for Business 40. They were concerned about the small shoulder width, and with the height of the embedding, as long as the height is 6 foot or above, they are fine with the brick.
So the brick is part of the base case, we don't have to worry about it.
The brick is part of, the brick still costs $1.6 million, but we're working to make sure that that stays in with the project.
Yeah.
No, understanding the limited funds that we have, and we feel that, given, you know, the rendering that is shown here, that the impact will still be grand.
Because for the 52, it does have the brick.
Yes, yes, it does. It has, right, and in that case, where they have wider shoulders, that is actually brick that has been laid like you would with a house up against the wall that was already previously poured.
And how is this going to be?
This, there's a plastic form that the brick is inset into the plastic form, which is then set up to form out for the pour. So when the concrete goes into the form, it actually wraps around.
Thinner brick.
Yes,
It's more of a veneer.
right.
Well, they're both veneers technically, but I think what she's getting at is that this brick is ingrained into the wall so that if a truck
Right.
or a car hits it, it's not gonna spald off like a typical veneer would.
Right, it's not just like mortar that's in between the bricks. It's actually encapsulating and going around a good percentage of the brick.
Mr. Governor?
I was following on the dollars, and I thought I heard you maybe clarify for me, but the savings, if we didn't do what, where is the savings again on that piece?
Right, the total retaining wall costs for stamping, staining, and the embedded brick is $3.8 million. Yeah, that's on attachment A. 1.6 million of that is the brick embedding. 1.6 million is the stamping, and $500,000 plus or minus is the staining.
And so, and that's what I was going back to, what they've done on 52. Does that have stamping at the lower portions of that?
It does not. The brick veneer in that case comes down to the barrier rail, the concrete barrier. But in this case, because of how close the shoulders being much more narrow than what are along US 52, NCDOT did not feel comfortable.
So there'll
with-
be more space, more wall.
Right, yeah, so if the existing barrier is 3 feet high on the US 52, if you can envision like another 3-foot section above the barrier being plain concrete.
Okay. The reason I just asked, maybe I have to get a better visual of that and you can go ahead, but, just wondering what do we lose and gain from aesthetic approach from, because I know what I see on that side, it looks well, but, you know, in
Mhm.
terms of if we didn't do that, what do we lose and what do we gain?
Right. And really, it's the pattern that you see here, because it is white or a cream color, doesn't stand out tremendously, which is why we thought that even if we made the vertical elements still pronounced, separating the brick panels, the separate panels, and it would not be a huge impact into, you know, the visual, because here, when you look at it, the brick is what makes the statement.
If I'm correct, the lower area is not going to be stamped to look like brick. If we did it, it's stamped to look like limestone.
That's correct. That is correct.
Really, the brick's what draws you out.
Okay, so there were a couple more elements that could be done later. In all of the visualizations, I'll back up to a shot here. You can see on each end of the bridge there were monument bases and art shown that would be illuminated on each corner of the bridge. That is because these are not on the bridges. They're not a structural element, so they do not have to be constructed at this time. NCDOT would put in the conduit for the future monuments so that the lighting could be run up through to illuminate the artwork. And then the last thing was the utility relocation of aerial utilities, and that is if it's decided in the first phase to install the duct bank. And the utility relocation is a significant cost. There is a little over $500,000, $579,000 in the installation of the duct bank. We're working on it with NCDOT to try to reduce that cost. That includes 2 duct banks, one for Cherry and one for Marshall. We've asked if there would be any cost savings in having one duct bank that runs under under Business 40 in between those 2 streets. And we're still awaiting that number.
Duct bank. Sorry. Is that like?
It's a pipe that carries power lines. But you get no interest on the ducts.
Yes. But they do multiply after a certain age. Okay. All right, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions you have about where we are, where we're going.
Thank you, Ms. Light.
Okay. I'm still confused about the different sources of funds. Because, you know, the wording in our bond referendum was that the $3 or $4 million, whatever it was,
$3 million.
bond for aesthetic improvement.
I believe it may have said aesthetic and
Street and lighting, I believe.
street lighting enhancements and perhaps even pedestrian enhancements.
No.
It did not? Okay.
I haven't looked that up. But at any rate, so what I need to see is, and maybe it's here, and I just don't know how to focus on it, how the city bond money will be spent. Is it in part of your tables here?
We have not gotten to that point yet because we didn't want to move things around without knowing what our actual costs were, because that would cause a constant shift in funding. However, in looking at attachment A, we have looked at the enhanced sidewalk. Most of the improvements in option 1 will most likely be recommended, with the inclusion of or change to the brick embedded retaining wall to reduce that cost down to 1.6 million. I guess the guidance that we will need is how important utility relocations are in the overall aesthetics, and the enhanced NCDOT horizontal rail that is colored to for creative corridors, aged copper look, would be included as well at no cost.
I'm sorry, you're losing me. You're saying that everything under option 1.
Yes. So if you look at option 1, you can see the current gap is $2.5 million. If in the revised memo, if we look at taking out the stamping and staining, we can save about $2.2 million, which leaves us then with a $300,000 shortfall.
But if I read this right, the multi-use path then is paid for by this bond.
The local match.
Only a little,
The local match.
which is necessary, or we don't get the $3 million either.
Okay, all right, but the local match, unless, again, I'm reading it wrong, is 700,000. This is 3.2 million. What?
Yes, the local match is 700,000.
That,
I'm sorry, that was confused.
It's not a one-to-one match.
No, but I'm saying,
80/20. 80/20.
It's 80/20.
Right.
yeah, but what I'm seeing, the way I'm reading this is that the bond money for aesthetic enhancements is being used to pay for the multi-use path. No?
It's yes, it is providing a local match for the multi-use path elements that are substantially funded by the CMAQ funding.
Okay.
So yes,
okay,
it is.
so it's just the 700,000 that's going to be a part of payment for the, okay.
That is correct.
Right. Yes, the CMAQ funds are 2.987 million that are federal funds.
Yeah.
And so if the city uses the local match funds that from the bond funds, then that's it's still the same amount of money that's able to be spent for the project, but those monies have to be directed towards the multi-use path. The balance of the bond funds then can be directed towards any other betterment.
No, that's not the way it's
I can read the language if you want. Of course, legally, you could spend it for anything in transportation quarter, but the language in the bond description said business 40 quarter improvements. This project would provide for the replacement of street lights and other aesthetic improvements along Business 40 through downtown from US 52 interchange to Peters Creek Parkway. These improvements would be in addition to the North Carolina Department of Transportation's scheduled improvements along the corridor. That's what it said, street lighting and aesthetics.
Street lighting.
But again, legally, council could spend it for anything in the transportation category.
Couple of general comments. One, it would be nice, I think, as a general rule, whenever we talk about this, to have the language in there so we can refer to it.
Mhm.
I will say, aesthetics isn't the eye of the beholder, so what may be aesthetically to you, I mean, is
the sidewalk?
is a sidewalk aesthetics. Whatever. Number two, we are still missing information. One of the big pieces is how much money the creative corridors should come up with.
Yes. Last week, we had a meeting with Creative Corridors representatives, and we discussed NCDOT cost estimates. If you look at attachment B, you can see that the cost for the Green Street pedestrian bridge is, over $2 million.
Yeah.
And the Strollway Bridge, $730,000. There was,
Well, do you have any indication from creative corridors how much money they think they can raise?
their overall fundraising goal that's been communicated and shared publicly, I believe is $5 million. And of that, those funds would go to all of their priority projects, which include the Salem Creek Connector, MLK, and the Business 40 corridor.
Okay, so that $5 million is not all just for
No.
the project.
That's right.
Do you have any feel for how much? I mean, we need to know that number, and I want more than just their fundraising goal. At some point, we gotta commit, and they gotta be able to write a check. And there's a big difference. There's a conversion of the soul and the conversion of the pocketbook. People may like it, whether or not they write a check, it's a different item. General comment, if you look at the numbers, we were looking at a total at the top, this was in our book, a little bit over 12.3 million, I'm rounding there. And we're gonna be right now about 6.5 million short of that, if we get all the money from the tax folks and the bond money and this, that, and the other. We've got to make some difficult decisions. We got to basically cut this thing in half. Now that could be augmented by what Sheriff Porter's can write a check. But and what we eliminate, and I like your idea, what do we have to do now, what can be done later type thing. But at the end of the day, we're gonna have to make some very tough decisions, and somebody's goose is gonna get cooked. It may be something that I like, Dan doesn't, and you like it, and Molly doesn't like it. We're gonna have to make some tough choices there. And at this point, the only comment I would make is, I certainly don't want to do everything halfway. I think we need to pick out what's really important, what's going to have the most impact, and do those things. And what those are, I don't know yet. But I do think that this committee and then the council have got, pretty soon, have got to make some pretty tough decisions on what's not going to make the cut.
That is correct. And just for your consideration as well, I did include, prior to Creative Corridors hiring the architects and designers for the Strollway Bridge, Peters Creek Parkway, and the Green Street Bridges, NCDOT had provided cost estimates for low arch steel truss bridges. And they are shown on attachment A. They are considerably less than the estimates for the Creative Corridors bridges. And to be honest, the Creative Corridors bridges are unique. They do provide a wow factor for our city, for the corridor. And I can go back through the slides and find those images. So here's the Green Street pedestrian bridge. One of the things that they have considered, and they're going back to their architect to work on to see if the design could be modified slightly to take it from tubular steel to rectangular, because that's cheaper to produce and more readily available. And to see if also the members could be sized smaller and still, provide the same aesthetic look.
I mean, this would be a good example. You could build a pedestrian bridge and put the architectural flair later.
The base structure, I guess it would have to be designed, I believe, is
Yeah.
one element.
Yeah.
But then, really, this is a cable-stayed bridge. And to put the architectural elements later, it would just be like adding artwork, similar to what's being done on the Salem Creek Connector with the double arches that are going over 52.
But are those, if I may correct myself here, those arches, are they a load bearing?
Yes, they are.
Okay, then that, they can't be added.
That's right. But you could make a project look similar by, even if you did a truss bridge and you added an upper member and put some cables on it, an upper member that was not load bearing, and then some decorative cable. So there are different options to consider, but at this time, as you mentioned, time is of the essence.
Yeah, if they're going out for bids in early next year, that's what they're going.
That's correct. They're gonna be getting documents ready for the request for proposals.
Okay, that's all for now.
Ms. Montgomery pointed out that Ms. Johnson is here, who is associated with Creative Quarters, and may have an update.
I won't say it's an update, but I will share with you, the committee will meet in the morning. I will share your concerns about the expediency at which they will share with you what their goals are and how much they are raised. They will be issuing a save the date card very soon that will announce the actual committee campaign. But they have been diligently working towards meeting a goal that will help satisfy some of the needs that you have.
Thank you very much. Connie, what is our timeline? When are we going to have to make the cut? October? At our,
And we anticipate, Mr. Chairman, bringing you information next month for your October decision, and it is necessary to make a decision in October, I'm afraid, in order to
the
satisfy.
second full council meeting?
Yes, so we'll bring it back to committee. But we anticipate bringing you a package of options or staff recommendation actually, for cuts and/or any additional identified revenues that we can propose to you that would close the gap that you see in the options.
Mr. Governor?
In the timing of how we'll get that, prior to that, enough time to be able to ask for questions, not just in a Thursday packet prior to the meeting, but enough time to be able to look over that, ask questions, have some dialogue prior to that, I think would be helpful so that we can.
We'll try to see if we can have some individual conversations ahead of time.
That'd be great.
Other questions? Other comments at this stage? Got a tough job.
Yeah.
There.
Not to make any friends.
It was, and it was not made any easier by the legislature's switcheroo on us, deciding to dump on Winston-Salem as compared to Raleigh and Greensboro and so on betterment. Anything else from members of the committee? Anything else, Mr. Turner?
No.
In that case, thank you very much. We'll see you next. Ms. Johnson?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Not the very far right now. There is need. My name is Joycelyn Johnson. I live at 2426 Anderson Court. But I travel Northwest Boulevard regularly. And I've shared with members of the committee, members of the council, members of staff, the need for that section in between, in particular at the bridge over Northwest Boulevard to be resurfaced. It is extremely bad roadway from Liberty Street out to Patterson. I've tried to do the citizen things and put the request in over a year ago to CityLink. I've talked to staff members over the years, and in a year and a half, we still do not have any improvements there on Northwest Boulevard or at the intersection at Liberty and Patterson. Both those requests were put in at the same time. The potholes are terrible. And we need to do something fairly quickly about getting those remedied. Thank you.
Patches and Liberty and Patterson, and I'm not sure.
Liberty Patterson at the salvage, not too far from the Bethesda Center.
But
What bridge, 52, and the bridge where you come out with the under the bridge?
Correct.
so you're talking about Northwest Boulevard where it goes under the 52 bridge?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was confused.
Correct. But if you look at the bridge over 52 on 4th Street, on Fifth Street, the same kinds of, you all almost can see the rebar.
So,
in that.
3 locations.
So there are 3 locations.
So the,
Fifth Street at 52, just as you leave, if you're heading downtown, as you leave United Metropolitans on one side, the emergency medicine, the emergency management systems on the other. As you're approaching Linden, the rebar is very visible. Right. Thank you.
Ms. McCullough, you got those locations? All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Okay, anything further? If not, then we will stand adjourned. We'll see you Monday.